Hello, this is Darrell Castle with today's Castle Report. This is Friday, the 5th day of September in the year of our Lord 2025. I will be talking today about the deterioration of freedom and the imposition of top-down control of speech and thought in the mother country primarily. That country that once believed in the concept of freedom from at least the year 1215 when the Great Charter, the Magna Carta, was imposed on King John by the British nobles. English people have had the proud belief that they were free. King John did not resist the charter, but accepted it. He accepted the concept in writing that the law applies equally to all Englishmen, king and commoner alike. When the American colonies rebelled against England, it was at least in part because they wanted the rights of ordinary Englishmen, which they believed were denied to them. In a system that is euphemistically referred to as democracy, people are supposed to choose their own leader, so the government is the people. That is the belief that we accept as true, even when we know it no longer is true, if it ever was. I'm talking about Great Britain right now, rather than the United States, because things are happening in Britain that would not be tolerated here. At least I hope they would not be. By way of disclaimer, I haven't been to England in many years to see firsthand for myself what is happening, but I read and I follow the stories continually reported by others. Great Britain seems to be in the middle of a crisis involving immigration and the rights of immigrants versus the rights of Englishmen. The English government and recently the courts have clearly taken the position that immigrant rights are preeminent. That led to a crisis that many believe is the precursor to civil war. In other words, they said in court, yes, we admit that the rights of immigrants are preeminent over those of ordinary Englishmen. So why would a government of the people, choose to prosecute its own people for just talking about immigrants in a negative way? Unbelievable, yes. Yet we accept it as true because it's happening right now in Great Britain. For example, consider the case of British comedian Graham Lennon. I hope I pronounced that right, Lennon. I admit that I was completely unfamiliar with the man until I, like the rest of the world, read his words, followed his story. His story is all the more disturbing because it is not at all unusual in England today. Mr. Lennon was in America doing some type of project in Arizona when he attempted to board his flight to London. He was singled out and subjected to extra screening. He chalked it up as just the joys of air travel today, but when he arrived in London, he found it was a lot more than just inconvenience. The moment I stepped off the plane at Heathrow, 5 armed police officers were waiting for me. Not one, not two, 5. They escorted me to a private area and told me I was under arrest for 3 tweets. In a country where pedophiles escape sentencing, where knife crime is out of control, where women are assaulted and harassed every time they gather to speak, the state had mobilized 5 armed officers to arrest a comedy writer for this tweet. And no, I promise you, I'm not making this up. Okay, here is the tweet, or printed statement, or expressed thought, however you want to say it, that got him arrested. Quote, if a trans-identified male is in a female-only space, he is committing a violent and abusive act. Make a scene. Call the cops if all else fails. Punch him in the balls, end quote. That was the tweet that got this man arrested. There were 3 tweets in total, as the officers told him, but I won't quote the others because there's a lot of profanity in them. The case is significant. We hear of it because a victim is a prominent man who apparently has a popular presence on British television. They confiscated his belt, his carry-on bag, and electronic devices and put him in a holding cell. This case is common and is happening all the time, but we know of this one for the reasons I just stated. Why do so many Middle Eastern and African migrants make their way illegally to England? There is freedom in England to a far greater extent than in the places they escape from. Freedom to speak and behave as they please for them, but not for Englishmen. No, if an Englishman said online what the migrants are free to say, he would be thrown in prison. There seems to be a 2-tiered system of freedom in Great Britain right now. 1 tier for the migrants, 1 tier for Englishmen. 1 for the Englishmen requires them to be very careful what they say or what they put online. If they insult migrants or trans people, they could be hauled into court and dealt with very harshly by an unsympathetic judge. I've been receiving emails from contacts that I know in Great Britain giving their opinion of what is happening because they know of my interest. I'm told that if I were in England, the Castle report from last week and this one might just get me arrested. When speech that used to be free is unapproved or unliked by the state, it could be termed as an incitement to violence. The emails that I mentioned invited me to attend a rally in London on Saturday, the 13th of this month, which I believe is a week from tomorrow. The rally is being organized by concerned people, both male and female. They hope to have 1 million participants from around the world in attendance. If I were 20 years younger, folks, I like to think I'd be there, but that's easy for me to say since I am safe here in America right now. Free speech is very important because without it, people are not really free. But it is not the most important thing at risk in this struggle. The real issue, the one that simply cannot be lost if freedom is to continue, is who is in charge of Great Britain? Is it the people through self-governance or a group of George Soros-funded elitists who have gained power and will not surrender power without a fight? More than 10,000 arrests happen every year in Great Britain for online comments, more than Russia. Many other countries we often think of as not free. There are many in Great Britain who are starting to say that if free speech is incitement to violence, according to the state, then so be it. Let it come. I've been surprised by all this madness so far, and the numb, uncaring attitude of people sometimes amazes me, but I will be beyond shocked if the British people totally surrender their freedom without a fight. That belief leads me to conclude that the British government is flirting with civil war. There might still be a little fight left in the English, despite decades of education, decades of poison poured into their bodies. I'm not the only one to see danger in the way the British government is behaving. Piers Morgan responded to the arrest of Mr. Lennon with this statement posted on X, quote, "What's happened today is absolutely ridiculous. 5 armed cops arresting him at Heathrow for tweets mocking the scandal of biological men invading women's spaces. When it comes to free speech, Britain is turning into North Korea," end quote. The Prime Minister of Great Britain, Mr. Keir Starmer, seems to sense the danger as well and is trying to occupy both sides of the argument at the same time. He issued an order back in July that the UK Home Office was to assemble an elite team of police officers. That's what he called them, an elite team of police officers to monitor social media for anti-migrant sentiment in a new investigations unit to flag early signs of potential civil unrest. Starmer has made several statements since then, apparently trying to appease those who would prefer to see England remain English. Statements such as, "If you want to live in the UK, you should speak English." He said that, Mr. Starmer. "If you want to live in the UK, you should speak English." Quote, "I want to see every asylum hotel closed," end quote. He said that as well. He does have precedent for telling the big lie because I think it was the propaganda minister of the nation Britain once defeated in a big war. That was the master teacher of the big lie. I suppose the idea is that if you can convince enough people to believe you, they will just chill out and accept tyranny and bondage where they once had freedom. Mr. Starmer also criticized the police for the Lanham address, not because it was terribly wrong and an unlawful arrest, but because it detracted the police from more important duties. What he didn't criticize was the 10,000 times each year it happens to ordinary Englishmen who don't happen to be famous or prominent. Mr. Lennon was released from custody on condition that he stay off X. Okay, Mr. Lennon, you can have the illusion of freedom as long as you stay off X. See, Mr. Lennon, what you did by speaking your mind publicly is now a crime in the UK, but you are prominent. So if you just shut up and leave the tyranny to us, we will allow you to keep that illusion. The police were nice to him, he said. They seemed to be just doing their jobs. Yes, quote, just doing their jobs. Yes, they were just going about the duty they were assigned and doing their jobs. I don't know who sworn officers or what sworn officers in the UK swear to, but I doubt if their oath requires them to enforce tyranny. That's the issue, though, isn't it? Always has been. Who is the police force and, more importantly, the military loyal to here in America? They take an oath to the Constitution rather than to a specific person, a la Nazi Germany, or to the government. In the UK right now, I don't know who they agree to support. British police, British military have a history of support for tyranny, which to some extent provoked the American Revolution. The British Navy needed sailors back in those days, and their press gangs would roam the countryside, kidnapping men from their homes and pressing them into service in the British Navy. They would stop American merchant ships on the high seas and kidnap merchant sailors. The Americans didn't like that. They got tired of it. They organized resistance, which resulted ultimately in 250 years of freedom and independence. We argue and test in our courts the issue of free speech, but it's still pretty important here in America. I hope we never see the day when people are grabbed off the street and imprisoned for something they said. It's hard to imagine, but with tyranny often comes gradually rather than suddenly. So every violation has to be dealt with in order to preserve the system that so many have died to build and to protect for future generations. Finally, folks, pretty much every week we read about some horrible crime committed by migrants in the UK. Quite often those crimes are against children, more important than not. Working class girls, thousands of young girls have endured the crime of rape at their hands. The British government has so far chosen to imprison those who complain and let the criminals roam free. Apparently, however, many of those working class girls are getting tired of it, and that, at least in part, is why the rally in London is scheduled on the 13th, and it's so important. At least that's the way I see it. Until next time, folks, this is Darrell Castle. Thanks for listening.